Hi guys. Yes, I know. It's been a while. I don't even know how long it's been. I think my last video was actually my second trimester video, which is wild because now. Oh no, I think I did made a video announcing that we had a baby. I think I filmed that. I remember. Anyway, I now have a 10.5-month-old baby. So that's wild and crazy. And this is why I'm filming here in my bedroom. Hair not done. This is what you'll get. But the thing is, I was like, what's up? Sirius wants to join. Okay. It's not about you. Sit down. So I have a 10.5-month-old baby, which is crazy. And I still haven't filmed my birth story because, well, it was pretty traumatic. I wasn't able to think about it at first. And then I had some postpartum complications, and basically I was so tired, like in addition of having a newborn, obviously. So I was really, really tired and had to figure out some health things. And then okay, bye. I go back to work during summer, which is tourism season, which is crazy at work. And then now it's October. Apparently, I am now on holiday. It's my last day of holiday. Martin is asleep for his morning nap. I'm like, let's do it. So, which is why I'm just like filming in the bedroom, hair not done, makeup not done. Well, that's usual. And I'm gonna try and go through as much of my birth story as possible because I want to remember, kind of. I don't really want to remember, but I want to put it out there because I feel like there's a lot of amazing birth stories and like incredible experiences on YouTube. And some people don't really go into details when things don't go the way they wanted it to go, or things go a little bit differently and they have a bit of a traumatic experience. People tend to not talk about it, and that's really sad. I recently listened to a podcast with Becky Habersberger. So it's You Can Sit With Us. It's the Try Guys Wives podcast. And she talked about how she had a very traumatic birth experience, and basically every choice that she thought she would have was like taken away from her, and that resonated with me, and I was like, okay, yeah, that is exactly how I felt, so that's what I want to talk about. Anyway, enough about Becky Habersberger's story. I'll try to remember to put the link to their podcast in the description because it's great. Let's get into my birth story with baby Martin. So, I was 37-ish weeks pregnant and everything was fine. Baby was doing good, baby was kicking, baby was measuring okay, like pretty normal average baby. Everything was going great. And I went grocery shopping. Now, the thing that was bothering me at this point of pregnancy was that his head was basically engaged in my pelvis. Shh, stop that. And so basically my hip bone were like crunching his head like on the side. And yeah, that was very painful every time I was walking, which was kind of every day. So that was not ideal, but I was determined to be active and like still do stuff because my midwife was like, if you like lay in bed and like sit all day, it's not gonna activate labor. So do stuff, walk around, it's gonna help to like make it happen faster maybe for you, so that, you know, this pain of his head getting stuck in your pelvis goes away faster, which seems logical. So I was going about my day and I went grocery shopping, and someone in the store was carrying a big box of whatever, and I guess didn't see me. He turned the corner pretty fast, and I was there with my huge belly and his box of stuff just like rammed into my stomach. And it hurt. I'm not gonna lie, it hurt. But also I panicked because, you know, even though baby is protected and in the amniotic fluid and stuff, it's still scary. So I came home, sat down for a bit, did the things that you're supposed to do when you don't feel baby moving. So like eat sugar, drink fizzy drink, lay down, stimulate baby. And for about 2 hours I couldn't feel baby moving. So I called Mark and he was like, you should probably call the ER to ask like what to do. I called them, I asked them like, what should I do? And they were like, well, give it another hour and then come just to check because you're pretty close to term, so we just want to check. So I came to the ER because baby was still not moving. As soon as I get to the ER, they put the monitor thing on my belly. Baby's kicking, partying, all is good. But it's procedure. They have to do a full checkup, which includes an ultrasound. And the guy, during the ultrasound, was like, oh my god, your baby is huge. He is already over 4 kilos. Have you talked about that? Like, is it the first time you hear about having a huge baby? Are you gonna go for a C-section and stuff? And I was like, whoa. It's the first time anyone mentioned that this baby is bigger than normal. So, no. And then he looked at my papers and was like, oh my god, with EDS, that is a bit scary because you're at risk of uterine rupture. And basically, I was also more at risk of hemorrhaging. So, all of that, like, I was already more at risk than a non-sick person, non-EDS person. But because baby was huge, apparently, it was increasing the risk again. So they were scared and they were like, yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to give birth here. So we come back home and we don't really think about it. We're just like, what's going to happen now? And then the next day, someone called me and was like, hey, it's Marseille Hospital. And I was like, wait, what? Marseille? And she was like, yeah, we have an appointment for you tomorrow at 10. And I was like, in Marseille? That's the first time I hear about the fact that I have to go in Marseille. So what? And she was like, oh, no one told you? And I was like, no. So basically, long story short, the next day, we get down to Marseille, which is like 2.5-ish hour drive. We get there, it's a level 3 maternity hospital, so for high-risk pregnancy, you are supposed to give birth there. So we saw the anesthesiologist, midwives, OBGYN, a genetician, a ton of people basically, and they were all like, yeah, you have to give birth here. It's safer for you, it's safer for baby. You need to stay here basically. And I was like, well, I don't really have family or friends here. Don't really want to pay for a hotel for like a month. So what do we do? And she was like, well, you can go back home. And then when you're closer to term, you come here and you stay at the hospital until labor starts. And I was like, that's not possible. I can't stay here alone, away from home, by myself, basically. I can't, like, my mental health will not let that happen. So she was like, okay, well then we will schedule you a checkup every 2 days in Gap, so my original maternity. And then once they decide that your cervix is in a good place for an induction, you drive down, well, Mark drives us down, and then you get an induction. And I was like, cool, okay, we'll do that. That's a bit different to what we had planned because, you know, we had planned to give birth half an hour away from home, Mark being able to go back and feed the dogs and stuff like that. That was not going to happen apparently. But we made peace with that and we went to the checkup in Gap every 2 days. and things were moving along. I was contracting a little bit. My cervix was, I think, 1.5 centimeters, and like things were happening. So I was like, okay, it's probably gonna be soon. Come November 7th, so about 10 days after the original incident. 10 days after, Gap Hospital, maternity, decided that I was in a good place for an induction. So they called Marseille and they were like, hey, do you have a room for her? Can we send her, basically, because we don't want her to go into labor here in case something go wrong. And Marseille says, yes, you can send her. We will induce her, probably not tonight, tomorrow. So we go home, we say goodbye to the dog, pack the bags for like 3-4 days maximum, and then arrived in Marseille. It was almost 9 p.m. I don't really remember what happened. I know that Mark was not allowed to come with me. I was taken into labor and delivery, basically. And the lady and us, she was under the impression that I was going to be induced the next day, like in the night, because that's what we were told, and that's what apparently they had talked to each other on the phone. So we were like, yeah, I'm here for an induction. So she, of course, being a nurse and doing her job in labor and delivery, she prepped me for an induction. So she put an IV in me, took like a lot of blood tests and COVID tests and everything. And I was alone in this room that I had no clue where I was. No one had explained anything to me, like what's the step in an induction, because 2 weeks ago that wasn't even a question. What's happening to me? I was 38 plus 3 days, 38 weeks plus 3 days, I think. So it was safe to have an induction, but no one had told me what will happen. So I panicked, of course, had a full meltdown while she was putting my IV. Also, the IV that she put in my hand was, I don't know if she put it wrong or whatever, but it hurt so bad. Like, I couldn't feel my hand up until my elbow. So that was really painful. And I was crying, I was panicking, I was hysterical, basically. So she decided to break protocol and go get Mark, because I was not calming down. Mark arrived, and she was like, okay, we'll figure out what's happening to you. Stay here. We stay here. I'm on the bed, obviously, and Mark is on this very tiny, very uncomfortable chair. And bless him, he drove after his day of work to Marseille. And now it's the middle of the night. It's almost midnight. We don't know what's happening. He just like fell asleep on this chair with the head on the railing of my bed. It was, oh my god, it was horrible. I couldn't fall asleep, obviously. I was not very comfortable being 38 plus weeks pregnant. So yeah, someone arrived and was like, there's been a misunderstanding. We don't really know why you're here. We are going to transfer you into the high-risk pregnancy wing part of the hospital. And then tomorrow morning, the doctor will come and we'll see what's happening. So we left labor and delivery, and we arrived in room 321 in the high-risk pregnancy service. It was like 3 a.m. We got there, we fell asleep straight away. Next thing we know, lady comes in to check blood pressure and like give breakfast and stuff, and she's still under the impression that I'm getting an induction. So she's like, you can't have breakfast, sorry. And I'm like, well, that's fine, I just want to know what's happening. Doctors are doing their round, and so the doctor came at about 10 a.m. And she was like, yeah, I don't know who told you you could get an induction, because, well, that's not very recommended in your case. We will just have you wait and see when the actual like natural labor starts. so you're not getting an induction. I was like, well, can you take the IV off then? Which she was like, oh, I'll have to check with the doctor. I couldn't feel my hand and I hadn't slept because I was in so much pain from the IV. So I was pissed. And also she was like, you're not getting an induction. We're waiting for natural labor to start, but you can't come home. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, it's better if you stay close to the hospital because the 2-hour drive might start like induced labor. And we don't want you giving birth like on the side of the road. Which is fine. It's a valid concern. I get that. But I couldn't stay here. So basically, long story short, a few meltdowns after that, we stayed in the hospital. And then started the longest period of time of my life. It was 15 days. We arrived November 7, we left November 21st. 15 days, well, 14, 2 weeks in Marseille, in this like gloomy hospital from a horror game with like moist stuff on the ceiling and mold and not the ideal place to give birth in. But we were here and we had to stay. So we did. And we waited and we waited and we waited. A few times during the stay, they were about to say, okay, now the risk of waiting for natural labor is lower. No, the risk of waiting is higher than the risk of induction, so we might induce you. And that was when my blood pressure was really high, and they couldn't get it down. So they were like, okay, we might induce you because your blood pressure is high. And the second time was when they were doing a checkup and they couldn't find a lot of fluid in my belly. Basically, they were like, oh, maybe baby's lacking fluid, so we might induce you. But the 2 times with the blood pressure, they had me do like acupuncture. So someone came and it was supposed to help start labor naturally. It did nothing but lower my blood pressure, so they did not induce me. And then with the amniotic fluid thing, they checked again and they found some fluid that was hidden by baby or whatever. So they did not induce me. I was at this point not worried about baby's size because they redid the measurement and they were like, no, he's big, but he's like okay big. It will not be a problem to have a vaginal birth. So C-section was off the table and they were okay with me trying for vaginal birth as long as labor was starting on its own. Now, keep in mind, I'm in the high-risk pregnancy wing. There's people all around that are like, that have to stay in bed, that are alone, that I get it. There are way worse cases than my case. Because there's worse than you doesn't mean that you don't have the right to complain. Because I was miserable. I honestly didn't even want to give birth anymore. I wanted to go home and like curl up in my bed with my dogs. I was miserable. And everyone, the midwives and stuff, they were like, oh, but you're so lucky, you can walk around, or you have your partner here, because thankfully Mark was able to stay with me. I was still miserable. Okay, I could walk around, but I could walk around in this like horrible hospital in the city that I hated. Well, I didn't hated it back then. I just didn't like it very much. It's a seaside town with seagulls and stuff, and it was so far away from what I call home, which is mountains and fresh air and silence. Silence, oh my god. We were above the highway. So yeah, I was miserable. And every day, the ladies were checking my cervix and how things were going. I had to stay monitored for about half an hour to check if baby was okay. And basically, they were like, we don't know why you're not into labor with like contractions like this and a cervix that is like dilating like that. Why are you not into labor? And their conclusion was the only thing that I was missing was oxytocin, which is the hormone that your body produces when you're happy. And I was miserable, like the most miserable that I have been in my whole life. I was not producing oxytocin. That was not going to happen. And they were all like, oh, think about your happy place and like think about stuff that makes you happy. And all I can think about was all of this stuff that makes me happy. The mountains, my dog, my home. They're all not here and I'm stuck there. So that would make me even more miserable. And the fact that they were saying that the only thing that I was missing to go into labor was oxytocin, and yet they would still refuse to give me oxytocin because they have that option. That's how induction works. Giving you not natural oxytocin, but like a medication that is oxytocin. So yeah, that was a very long time. I one day was asking the doctor how long they will wait until we do something, because I felt like I was never gonna give birth. Like I was going for elephant time pregnancy thing. And I was done. I just wanted to go home and be left alone, basically. And she said, we will go until 42 weeks if needed. 42 weeks. I arrived at 38 weeks. And I was like, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make it 42 weeks. Plus, they had a different like computer system that recompute my birth date, like what's it called? My full term date, and they switch it one day later. So basically, when I was indeed 40 weeks, for them I was only 38 plus 6. No, not 38, 39 plus 6. So yeah, 42 weeks, I was like, I'm not gonna make it. I'm literally gonna jump through that window, or I'm gonna like steal the keys of the car and go back home. And if I do give birth on the highway, well, I give birth on the highway. So yeah, I was miserable. And that night, November 17th, so 10 days after arriving, I was Googling how to break your own water, because one of the reasons that they would do something would be if my water broke. So I was like, how can I make my water break? And I was Googling that, and Google is like, don't do that. It's very dangerous, infections and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Next day, November 18th, at 4 a.m., my water broke. Thank God something was happening. So I called the midwife. Well, no, I woke up Mark and I was like, my water broke. And he was like, okay, now what? And I was like, well, I called the midwife, and she was like, oh, finally something's happening. And I was about to slap her, seriously. So yeah, she was like, oh, we'll put you on the monitor and stuff. We'll bring coffee for your husband and blah, blah, blah. Mark fell back to sleep. Literally, I went through the first like 2 hours of contractions alone because he fell back to sleep. He woke up around 6-ish, which is still early for him. I have been contracting for about 2 hours, and they checked me, and I was around 3 centimeters, and they were like, okay, would you like to walk around and stuff, because now, you know, we monitored you and baby's doing good, so you can walk around if you want. So I did for a bit, and around 10 a.m. and I was like, you know what, I've been doing this for 6 hours, can't really do much, I'm tired, I've been here for like 10 days already, eating not so great food, sleeping not so well. I don't know how long I can do this. Can you please give me gas and air? Because the pain was a bit much. So they were like, well, if you have Gesanair, you'll have to get to labor and delivery and you will not be able to move around that much. And I was like, that's fine. I don't care. I want some form of pain relief. So we get down to labor and delivery. I try Gesanair. It makes me very, very nauseous. So we don't do that. Well, I had already puked, so it was fine. I was just nauseous, but still not ideal. So we decided to get rid of the Gesanair, and even though my initial birth plan was to wait as long as possible to go to the hospital and then not have the epidural, I was not in the headspace to like control my pain and go with the flow of the contractions and stuff. I was not able to do that. I was sleep deprived, food deprived, happiness deprived, everything deprived. So I was like, you know what? It's okay. Just give me the epidural. I can't do this. Help me. I remember saying to Mark 1,000,000 times per contraction, please help me. Please get someone to help me. Please get someone to help me. And it was probably very painful for him to watch as well. And he did not... Like, if we had been more prepared to be in a hospital setting, he would probably have tried to be like more encouraging, like, yeah, you can do it, stuff like that. He was done as well. He was tired too. He could not bear to see me like that. He was like, let's do what you say, let's get you the epidural. So around 10:30 I arrived in labor and delivery, and about midday, I think, the anesthesiologist got here. And oh my god, the anesthesiologist is your best friend. For real though. She was so patient. I didn't feel a thing. I was scared of epidural because everyone is. Didn't feel a thing. And she was very positive and going like, oh, you're doing great, mama, and like, you got this, and it's gonna be wonderful, and you're gonna meet your little boy soon. She was so positive, like the best person I've met in that hospital in that 15 days. Seriously amazing anesthesiologist team. So then Mark came back in the room and everything calmed down a little bit. I think I took a nap. I don't really remember, but it was early afternoon. I think I took a nap, and then around I want to say around 7 in the evening. Well, no, something happened before that. Yeah, the epidural was not fast enough for how fast things were going, so I was still in a lot of pain because the epidural was not... I don't know how it works, but I was still in a lot of pain, so they put me under a weird cocktail of medications and stuff. And that made me very, very delirious and very loopy. And that slowed down the progressions of things, because I was on track for 1 centimeters per hour up until that point, and then everything stopped. So then they gave me oxytocin, and I was pissed. Like, it's a good thing that I was so loopy, because I would have slapped her hand away and like be like, bitch, you don't put oxytocin in me because you refused for 10 days to give me that. I don't want it now. But she gave me oxytocin. She also gave me the shot because my water had been broken for over 12 hours. So she gave me the shot. And then I think around 7-ish in the evening, I was pretty close to full dilatation. And she realized, the midwife realized, that baby was sunny side up. So instead of, if you're laying on your back, which was another thing that I wanted not to do, I wanted to labor at least on my side if I had the epidural, and preferably on all fours or like leaning on something. But they were like, no, that's not an option, you're laying on your back. So didn't have that. Oh, I think Martin's waking up. Wrap this up. I didn't have that option. They realized that, so basically if you're laying on your back, baby is supposed to be looking down at the bed. and Martin was looking up, so his backbone next to my backbone, which is the wrong way to be presenting. It's possible to give birth that way, but it's like it put their head in a bigger space. Basically, it's going to be bigger to get out. And he already had a big head, so they were like, we're going to flip him. And they were like, we get 3 attempts to flip him. So she washes her hand up to the elbow, and then she like goes in there, probably not up to the elbow, and she rotates the baby with her hand. And at the same time, you push so that the head gets stuck. So she first had to unstuck him, then rotate him, and then I had to push so that he would like come out a bit. And she was very encouraging. She was like, oh, you're pushing great. This is going to be like no problem to give birth, blah, blah, blah. It took the 3 attempts. Of course, he didn't flip the first time. He didn't flip the second time. And then someone enters the room, like opens the door. I'm legs wide open, feet in the air. Everyone's like down there looking at my vagina. And he opened the door and goes, oh, so we're rotating here and blah, blah, blah. And I full on panicked because I had said that I did not want, if possible, any men in the room, having had past traumatic experience with men. So Mark, being the great partner that he is, just like kicks this guy out of the room with no explanation. Turns out he was like the head like gynecologist surgeon thing, like he was such an important person, and Mark just went by, you're not coming this room. So yeah, that was a great moment. I was so out of it, they had to explain what happened to me afterwards, but yeah. So they turned baby, it was about 7 p.m. Then at 8 p.m. They decided I was fully ready to have a baby, but they will still wait a little bit to give him time to like be lower in my pelvis so that I would have less pushing to do. And around 10 p.m. the nurse came in and was like, okay, time to push, let's get ready. So she put my feet up in the stirrups, and I told her immediately, I was like, I'm not comfortable, this is hurting my hip, because my hip had been dislocated for about 3 months at this point, and the physiotherapist was not really keen on like putting it back whilst I was pregnant. He was like, we'll do that after you give birth. So I was in pain, and I was like, they're too high, we need to lower the stirrups, I'm not comfortable to push in that position. She was like, trust me, they are good, that's how it's supposed to be. She was horrible, by the way. She was the worst person I encountered in this hospital. The lady that was checking me during the entire labor, the day nurse, was an angel. She was horrible. She was, not gonna lie, pretty old, so old school, like OBGYN practice, very, very poor bedside manners. And she was like, no, that's how it's supposed to be, let's push. So I started pushing how we had learned in like the birth class, and which was pushing while you're breathing out to help control the pushes. And she was like, no, that's not working. You need to hold your breath and then push. And I could not figure out what she wanted me to do. I was like, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I couldn't push. I felt like I was useless. And she was reinforcing that impression. She was like, no, that's useless. That's not how to push. That's useless. No, not like that. Nothing positive ever came out from her mouth. It was all like, no, you're not, you're doing it wrong, basically. And I was like, I never gave birth, lady. I'm trying, trust me, I'm trying. I was giving it all I had. And basically I heard her say, okay, 5 more minutes and then we need to call someone. She didn't say why she needed to call someone. She didn't say what was going to happen, but hearing her saying we are going to have to call someone, made me panic, and I pushed so hard. And finally, Martin was born. His heart has been like panicking a little bit for almost 3 hours at this point, like ever since they turned him. So it was time to get out for him. And also, during the pushing, I heard of them say meconium, and I saw the pediatrician get ready for aspiration, which is terrifying because they take your baby, and in this hospital it's in the same room as you, so you kind of see them like hunched over your baby, and you hear this horrible noise. It's like a dentist suction thing, but you know that it's in the lungs of a newborn, so it's terrifying. Meconium means that he had pooped inside of me, and so he was breathing liquid with his poop in it, which was not ideal. So that happened. When he came out, they put it on me for about like 2 seconds. I got covered in poop, and then they took him away. They had to get out of the room, not for the meconium aspiration thing, but because the scale in our room was not working. So they took him away, and I was like, where are they going? Where are they going? I want him back. I was panicking, and they were like, it's fine, it's coming back. He's coming back. They did bring him back, and then I heard I pushed out the placenta, which was fine, and then I heard the midwife say, well, let's get ready to suture, to like stitch you up. And I was like, oh, did I tear? Because I thought I did. That's what stitches are for, right? Specifically because my birth plan said, black on white, said I did not want an episiotomy. And they were like, oh, well, no, you didn't tear. I had to cut because it was gonna tear. So basically, she just cut me. I had an episiotomy without my consent, which was one of the most traumatizing part for me, because that is a medical act. That is not something you do willy-nilly. So every medical act, at least under the French law, has to be consented. I had to she should have asked the question either to me or to Mark if I was incapacitated. She didn't. She just like grabbed the scissors and cut. And Mark knew that I was very against the episiotomy, and that if I was not able to say no, he should say no. And he was like, yeah, I saw her grab the scissors and I couldn't say anything because she just went, okay, knowing fully well that I was at risk of hemorrhaging, she just cut me. And somehow in the process, she cut a vein. So I was really, really bleeding. And she took an hour to stitch me up. It took an hour and 2 midwives to stitch me up. I had 24 stitches internally and 11 externally. It was all with non-resorbent stitches, so I had to get them taken out in like 10 days. And during all this time, Mark is like on the side holding Martin, who's like trying to like suck on his nipple, and Mark is like, ouch, ouch. I'm like, ouch, seriously? So yeah, it took an hour to stitch me up, and then they put Martin on me. He fed for a bit, but I kept passing out. Like, I think I passed out about 8 times. So they were like, yeah, maybe you should not be holding him that much because you're literally passing out. At this point, it's Saturday morning, 3-ish in the morning, and I haven't had food since Thursday, so not Friday, Thursday at 6 p.m. So I'm a bit food deprived, in addition to just having given birth. Mark had to be the one to go and give him his first bath, which is another thing that we wanted to have, like delay bath to keep the keep the vernix on his skin. It's apparently very good for baby to reabsorb that and for it not to be washed away, but because he had pooped in me, he had to be washed. So yet another thing that we wanted and that did not happen. Skin on skin immediately did not happen for me. Breastfeeding immediately did not happen for me because I had to be stitched up. The no episiotomy did not happen for me. Nothing that I thought that I was going to be able to advocate for was offered to me. I felt like everything was taken away. So we were put, for the rest of the night, we were put in the same room that we arrived in 10 days before, 11 days before, on November 7th, because they couldn't find a room, like a delivery room. Because once you give birth, you are moved to a different section of the hospital. Then we did the first day or so, where they teach you like how to bathe him and how to wash the umbilical cord and stuff like that. And Martin was not peeing, not pooping. He was eating very well. And I was so glad, and I still am, that I was able to breastfeed, because that is the only thing that I had planned for that I had left. So I clung to that so bad. And I was like, I don't want this to end because I need that to heal myself. It was so traumatic, giving birth and not having any choice in what's happening. I know that you're not supposed to make a plan because nothing will go according to plan, blah, blah, blah. But some things, including the episiotomy, should have been a choice. I should have been asked if I wanted to let it tear, basically, if I was agreeing to a medical act, and I was not asked, which is the main part that I'm mad about. But then after, when they discovered Martin was not peeing and not pooping, they were like, well, okay, we will watch him and whatever, blah, blah, blah. He had a bit of jaundice as well. And they did not want us to go home until he was peeing and pooping. He peed, I think, 2 days after, and he pooped only 5 or 6 days after being born. But they finally agreed to let us go on November 21st. So Martin was almost 3 days old. They agreed under the only condition that a midwife would come and see me and Martin every day at home. So we did that. We went home. Not gonna lie, as soon as we got home, everything went fine. Martin was peeing, he was drinking, I was happy, my milk was coming in. I mean, this child was just not okay for the first 3 days because I was not okay. I was not able to care for him properly because I was done with this hospital, basically. I just wanted to go home. So I did. November 21st, 2022, we got to take home our sweet baby boy. And postpartum is going to be the topic of another video, which I don't know when I'm going to be able to film that, but it's coming. Thank you guys for listening to my birth experience. It was incredibly traumatic for me. It doesn't have to be for you. Advocate for what you want. Some things are going to be out of your control. Where you give birth. If it's safer for you to give birth in the hospital and you wanted a home birth, well, if it's safer for you, it's the best choice. If it's safer for baby, it's also the best choice. But some things, like breastfeeding, like no episiotomy, like laboring not on your back, a lot of stuff are up to you. Be your own advocate. You're the one that knows what feels good for you. Basically, the doctors are here in case there's a medical issue. But all of it that happens in your head, the mental strength, the incredible strength that it takes to actually birth a human, bring out a human in the world, that's entirely up to you, and I wish things went differently for my birth. Martin is perfect, and I think he makes up for everything that happened before his birth and during his birth by being such a sweet angel baby. He was born, by the way, at 41 weeks plus 3 days. That baby was comfy in there. And he was 4 kilos. So that doctor that measured him at 4 kilos at 37 weeks, like, change your glasses, mate.